got some additional install and function tips I want to talk about. But first of all, I do want to mention that this whole subscription piece, after a bunch of comments from some other online videos and supporters, I want to let you know that we're removing that. So you will have access to all the functionality in the app, and I'm going to go through some of that today and show you exactly how that works. But the first thing I want to show you is really the relationship between the clutch switch, the pedal, and the hydraulic release bearing. So I put this together, and this really demonstrates the position on the test bench. Now yours is going to probably be different, but this shows the pivot point, the clutch pedal, and the switch. And this is just a rough idea of, in the app, you have the delay, and this just gives you kind of a visual representation. These aren't entirely accurate as far as movement, and I'm going to show you that. But be it 5 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, this is kind of showing you the relation of the clutch pedal. So now let me show you what I'm talking about exactly. So when you have this set up in your car, and you can clearly see it here, sometimes you can't see this in the car, but when you push your clutch in, this is your throat bearing. Right here, clutch is fully engaged. When you're pushing it in, you can see the gap in the throat bearing disengaging the clutch. And anywhere in this point, it may be slipping the clutch. And fully engaged is here. We've depressed the button, and when you go to release it, it's going to stop it based on the delay you have set. So I know that was a whole lot. Let me back up here and show you what we're talking about. So first thing I'm going to do is go to the bite screen. On the bite screen, and this is kind of one of the very first things you're going to do, you want to find the point where your clutch starts to grab. And that's just with you turning the tires with your hands. So to demonstrate the relationship between the pedal and the throat bearing, I'm going to set the delay to 0. So this would be absolutely the fastest that it can respond to the clutch being released and the clutch switch being released. So first thing I'm going to do, and I have it set up on the bite screen, it's going to hold it for 15 seconds. So that'll give us lots of time here. What's very important is you need to make sure you hold the clutch pedal down for approximately 10 seconds so that the controller will respond appropriately. So there's 10 seconds. I'm going to dump it, and we'll see it's holding it there. I'm going to measure. We've already done the measurements, so I'll save you. But at 0, 0, 0, we're going to see 7.3-ish millimeters of gap right there, and then it releases. Now that 7.3 millimeters at the throat bearing, keep in mind that's at 0 seconds delay, equates to 25 centimeters here. So let me just set this up just so I can show you roughly what that looks like. So this would be the fastest that it can respond with this test bench setup. Okay, there's 25. I can do this with one hand. Right there's 25. That's the gap at 0. That's as quick as it can catch it. Okay? And you can see where our gap is here. That is still pretty far from being fully engaged, at least on this setup. Now, if you have, this is a 0.7 diameter master cylinder. If you have a very tight clutch, meaning from on the floor to engagement point is very close, you might have a little bit of challenge finding the bite point using this method. That doesn't mean it won't work. You may just have a tough time finding it. So let me go on. So if we set this up to 10 milliseconds, so I'm going to set it to 10. And keep in mind, on the bite screen, you want to make sure you set up your screen timeout for like 5 minutes, because as soon as your screen blanks out, the bite screen won't work. So I have my phone set up for 5 minutes. And keep in mind that the controller will not indicate changes on the bite screen. So I've set it for 10 milliseconds, and when we do it, count to 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So 10 milliseconds, we're going to end up with a gap here of about 6.8, 6.9. And on the pedal itself, we're going to end up with about 25.6. So that's going to look like, I can do this with one hand. Approximately right there. So that's 10 milliseconds, okay? Now if we go to 20 milliseconds, we end up with about 6.5 millimeters gap there, and almost 30, so 29.24. I don't even know if I can do this with one hand with that measurement, but let me just show you what that looks like. 29.24. Yeah. 29.25. All right, that's pretty close. We'll see if we can even come close to that here. Yeah. Okay. So that's approximately 29. So you can see that this gap is getting larger and larger as this gets smaller and smaller, which is closer to our engagement point. When we hit this to 30 milliseconds, and I'm going to put these numbers in the video so you can see them, we end up with a little over 5 millimeters here and 35 here. Now the total gap when the clutch is fully engaged, well, it's a lot. It's about 75, 76 millimeters. And I'm not using the metric system because I think we should be on it, but it's a little bit easier to see that than using fractions or decimals. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding as to how this works. The numbers are a little skewed. This is just a visual representation, but I just want to show you that the more delay that you set in here, the further out the pedal is going to be and the closer to the engagement point it is. So if your clutch engage is really far up here, you're golden. It's going to work really well. If your clutch engage is really close to off the floor, the bite screen you may not be able to determine the bite point by using that because it'll be too far engaged for you to spin it with your hands. But that doesn't mean that the motor won't be able to spin it and make it slip. So let's jump over to that. So when we set, I'm just going to put, so 20, we have 10 milliseconds set here on the bite screen. When we jump over to the launch screen, you'll see that it carries over the 10 milliseconds. Now, if that 10 milliseconds is a point where you can turn it with your hands, but you can just barely feel it, that's great, but that's going to be way too loose for the engine. So you're going to want to add 20 milliseconds to that, which would make it 30. That's a good starting point. Now, to initially start, and this would be the subscription piece that is no longer, I want you to set the ramp downtime to 0. And your launch slip, let's be conservative here in testing, we're going to set it at 1 second. All right, so 1 second's pretty conservative. And when we set that to 1 second, it's going to look like this. And you can hear that sound. That's actually the controller pulse width modulating the control valve. So instead of just dumping it, you're getting a slight slope or a gentle, more gentle release of the clutch. And that's where this ramp downtime will come in. And I'm going to talk about that more in a second. So in that scenario, 30 milliseconds, you'd want to set the car up maybe 3,000, 4,000 RPM on the two-step, half throttle or something, and dump the clutch. Don't floor it because we're testing. And see what the car, how it reacts. If it slips the clutch a whole lot, like you have sticky tires on, you have really good traction, it's probably going to slip a ton. And if it's slipping a whole lot, like the car is really not launching or taking off, then you're going to want to increase the delay number. So when we increase that number, go larger with the number, the clutch pedal will be further and further out or closer to the engagement point. So I recommend in the initial setup, going in 5 millisecond values. So we were at 30, we're going to go to 35 milliseconds, and if you come over here, right here, take a look at the green light. When we make the change, it's going to flash to accept it. Did you see that? I'll do it again so you can see it. That's the flash that you're looking for on the launch builder screen when it's accepting a change. Okay? So you'll go to 35 milliseconds and you're going to launch it again. And you're going to see the car's either going to spin the tires really hard, or it's going to slip a little bit more, or I'm sorry, a little bit less, and it's going to launch harder. And you're going to want to do this until it just completely knocks a tire off, and then maybe back up in 2 milliseconds. Now, when you get to the racetrack and you have a ton of traction available, slicks and everything else, the test setting that you used on the street is going to be way too much slip for a track. When there's a lot of traction available, it's going to slip that clutch a lot more. So start off very easy. Like, I don't want you just dumping the clutch with it on the floor and it's slipping a ton, and then it releases and it's a sticky track and it dumps the clutch and breaks parts. I don't want you to do that. You need to sneak up on this value. So when you're at the track, let's say 35 milliseconds on the street is working really, really good. Maybe try 40 at the track. And if it's knocking the tire off or bogging the car because it's not slipping, then start to back it down in 2 millisecond increments until you get it close. That's really the best way to do it. Okay, now let's talk about the secondary control here that was previously available to subscribers but is available to everyone now. So your launch slip is going to be how long it actually holds it at that value. So I have it set at 1 second. You'll see it's going to hold it 1 second and then it's going to release. Now, that's all great. However, if you're in a boosted car and you're actually making or adding power during that slip portion, you may want to utilize the ramp down time. So let me zero this out so you can really see it. So the ramp down time, instead of just a hold and release, that's going to give us a slope. I'm just going to go maximum so you can see it. So 2 seconds. The app developer still needs to fix the screen, but you get the idea here. It's going to hold it for 2 seconds and do a ramp. So let me show you what that looks like. Let me set that back to 0. It's hard to see here, but you're going to feel it. Instead of just a release, it's actually ramping the release down. And it's doing it over 2 seconds in this case. These are also additive. So if you wanted to do a ramp down time of say 0.75 seconds, and the initial launch slip, this would be you want to hold it, let's say for 0.25, that would be a total of 1 second of interaction. Okay, so it's going to hold it for 0.25 seconds, and then it's going to ramp it down or release it over 3/4 of a second for a total interaction of 1 second. So let me just show you what that looks like. I know it all happens fast, but I'm going to extend all of this so that you can see it. That would be more typical of what you would use in a car, but just for demonstration purposes, let's go the max here of 2 seconds and 2 seconds. So we're going to have a total of 4 seconds of interaction, and I'm doing it like this so you can see it here. You probably would never want to do this on your car unless you absolutely hate your clutch and you feel like making it into molten lava. So it's going to hold it for 2 seconds, and then it's going to ramp it down for 2 seconds. So that gives you a little better visualization. You know, it didn't just hold it and then release it over a very short span of time. So in testing, this may work really well, because if you have it way off, it's going to still ease the clutch out instead of just basically dumping it. Hopefully that's helpful. All right, let's talk about the master switch. Keep in mind, this doesn't have to be used for it to work, but if you want to have a master switch on your dash, this is how it's going to work. So you'll always have power to the unit when the car is on. You'll just turn on master switch on the app. When you do that, it's going to show you that it received the signal. So I'm going to switch it again. That's master switch off. master switch on, so that it's showing the signal. Now, let me show you the way this is going to look. So come around over here. So right now I have master switch on selected on the app, but I have my master switch actually off. Off? So the clutch controller is not going to work. Okay? But like maybe you're in your burnout. You don't want to slip the clutch when you dump it on the burnout, but when you get up to the line you want to, you're going to flip your master switch on, and then it's going to work. And keep in mind, I have it set for a pretty long setting here. One other thing I want to talk about is on your wiring harness. When you get this, they're obviously labeled, but your orange wire, which again is not needed to make it work, but if you choose to use this, it says on there TBSB for the Bankshift Billy, 12 volt out. Now the way this works, come a little closer, is if you want to use this 12 volt out to trigger something, maybe a two-step, maybe not have the nitrous turn on while it's interacting with the clutch, there's 100 different things you could use to activate it, maybe even just a light to show you that it's on. I'm going to show you how this works. So this right here, this voltmeter is measuring the output from that orange wire. Now I'm not going to push, well, I'll push it, but I have it set up for 4 seconds total. I'm utilizing both ramps, but you'll see that as soon as I push the clutch pedal, come on in, as soon as I push it, it's going to send 12 volts out. So maybe I'm staging, whatever. You can utilize this to turn on your two-step. So I'm staging and then I launch it. It's going to stay on until the Bankshift Billy is done modulating the clutch. So that was 4 seconds. Done. Let me change the settings so you get an idea here. So let's go 0.5 and 1. We're going to utilize both the settings because they're cool. So we have 0.5 on the hold and 1 on the slip, total of 1.5 seconds after I release the button. But as soon as I push the button with the clutch switch, it's going to active. So there we go. On the two-step, launch it, and out. Okay? So that's just another feature that you can utilize on the Bankshift Billy to make your life better. Bye.